Let's continue our study in the Gospel of John. We are now in 11:38 through 44. This is the resurrection of Lazarus. This is the last sign of the Gospel of John, except for the resurrection of the Lord Jesus himself. The emphasis on grief and mercy found in verses 33, 34, 35, 36, and 38 suggests that the Lord was moved by compassion as he made this one last sign for the people of Israel, but he is also doing this because it's a part of God's plan for him. Chapter 11, verse 38. Therefore Jesus, again being deeply moved in himself, comes to the tomb. Now it was a cave, and a stone was set upon it. The Jews of that era that could afford the expense preferred to bury their dead in a cave or a tomb carved into the rock. Carson and Barrett note that there are natural or carved caves that were used as vertical tombs, and there are horizontal ones as well. Barrett explains that according to the Jewish regulations contained in the Mishnah, rabbinic tradition, which was finally compiled hundreds of years later, when we look at local traditions in the little village of Bethany, Lazarus' grave was a horizontal cave. Carson says that the traditional site of the tomb of Lazarus is located in the village of Bethany on the far side, the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. But the site has seen many changes due to the construction of churches and mosques. We can see other tombs from that era in the area around Jerusalem, and sometimes we see the round disc-shaped, large disc-shaped stone that's used to roll against the opening. Sometimes it's like 2 meters high and maybe a foot thick. These are heavy stones. In this photograph, you can see the entrance to what used to be considered the tomb of the family of King Herod. Now it's just considered the tomb of a wealthy family of probably first century Jerusalem. And you can see the tomb entrance. It's now covered up with an iron gate. And you can see the large stone slightly to the left that can be rolled over against the entrance. This site is just downhill from the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in a large park there. When I visited years ago, I was able to enter into that tomb and see the several chambers in there and the several stone carved into the wall benches for the bodies. But now the place has been closed off and you can't go in anymore. It's nice to see that disc-shaped large stone there to the left of the entrance. Probably the tomb of Lazarus and probably the tomb of the Lord Jesus had a similar type of stone that could be rolled over to close off the tomb. Chapter 11, verse 39, Jesus says, "Remove the stone." Martha, the sister of the one who died, says, "Lord, it already stinks, for it's the 4th day." By the way, the Greek word remove is airo. This word frequently means lift up, but it can also mean roll it away or remove it. And so I think that's the meaning here. So we observe that Mary didn't say a word, but Martha, who is very concerned about the well-being of her guests in Luke 10:40, and maybe here too, Martha is afraid. Chapter 11, verse 40. Jesus says to her, "Did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" This if here is eon. It indicates if, and maybe you will, maybe you won't. The use of if here is not the other word for if, which means since you believe. It's the word if that's really an if. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you believe, you will see the glory of God. Martha's fears were reprimanded. The Lord does not use the expression the glory of God in verses 11:23 through 26, but his rebuke does summarize that conversation. Chapter 11, verse 41. Therefore they removed the stone where the one who had died was lying. Now Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. The word removed here is iro. Again, that's often translated lift up, but it's just better translated removed here. They rolled it away. A big stone like that, you didn't lift up, you rolled it away. And the words, where the one who had died was lying, well, those words are missing from the oldest manuscripts, but the majority of the manuscripts include these words, and they should be considered original. The prayer that the Lord Jesus prayed out loud was not a prayer for Lazarus to be resurrected. It's a prayer of thanksgiving. He himself had not yet seen Lazarus rise, but he was sure that Lazarus would rise. 1142, now I have known that you always hear me, but on account of the crowd standing by, I said this, so that they might believe that you sent me. He didn't pray so that he would be glorified by the people there. He prayed for them to believe. He wants them to enjoy the close relationship with God the Father that he has too. He wants them to understand that he does nothing on his own, but everything he does is by his Father's will. Chapter 11, verse 43. And having said these things, he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! It seems that the Lord Jesus didn't have to do any special ritual or anything to perform this miracle. This sign occurs without effort, without even a spoken prayer. In that way, this sign resembles the one where water became wine in Cana. That first sign, it was as if raising Lazarus was easy. The more difficult thing was getting permission from Martha. Well, the moment when Lazarus was actually raised from the dead isn't specifically described. Perhaps it was when the Lord Jesus cried out, but perhaps it was before that. It's not important to John. What is important to John is that a very significant sign has just occurred, and that sign, it cannot be denied. Chapter 11, verse 44. And the dead man came out, feet and hands bound with sheets of cloth, and his face had been wrapped with a cloth. Jesus says to them, loose him and let him go. Lazarus is referred to as the dead man. It's a wonderful way of putting it. He came back to life. He didn't come out as a dead man. The dead man came out, but he wasn't dead anymore. And that's obvious, but it's quite compelling the way it's written here. Such is the power of the Lord Jesus. This formerly dead man came out. The Lord Jesus was never particularly caught up with and amazed by miracles such that he would forget the physical needs of the people he served. In this case, perhaps the crowd was speechless and dumbstruck, but the Lord Jesus understood that Lazarus, still wrapped up in that cloth, needed some help. Carson compares the resurrection of Lazarus with the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. Lazarus, who was brought back to this life, was still wrapped in cloth, while the Lord Jesus, who experienced an everlasting resurrection, was not wrapped in any death garments. Lazarus' resurrection is a sign which points forward to the Lord Jesus and eternal resurrection. So by way of summary, he said he was the resurrection and the life, he indeed raises Lazarus from the dead. He proves that he doesn't just say he's the resurrection and the life. He shows that he's the resurrection and the life. And this great miracle is done right near Jerusalem. Many people from Jerusalem become eyewitnesses to this miracle. They should understand, and in accord with his prayer, they should believe. But what actually happened? Let's see.